Hello, hello, and welcome to the last live session of the first edition of the Purpose Sages Summit. Tonight, on the topic of purpose and spirituality. Hello, Anna. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Nia. How are you?
I'm also doing great because this is, I think it's the gem on the crown of the topics of the Purpose Stages Summit. So very much looking forward to diving into each one of the sages that made part of this one category of the Purpose Stages Summit, purpose and spirituality, and also happy to see you one more time. It was already getting traditional to meet you every night to go live and yeah, talk about this relevant topics.
Yes, I agree. It's very nourishing, very rich to give concentrated pills of all of these conversations that lasted more or less an hour each, being able
Mm-hmm.
to synthesize into a few key points and just get a feel, get a taste for the Purpose Ages Summit and for this theme in particular, purpose and spirituality. And it's such an important theme because the research shows that purpose, more than just a sentence that guides you strategically and cognitively, it's actually something that connects with your spirituality, something
Mm-hmm.
um, that sources from a deep place inside of you, and that provides also meaning and fulfillment aside from just like guidance from a cognitive perspective.
Yes, great. And I would love to dive into directly into the topic. But I really enjoyed the structure that we proposed for these lives, in which we have some time to center ourselves, to invite active listening into this participation from whoever is watching, either live or as a replay. So would you please guide us tonight through this exercise of centering?
Absolutely, Nia. Thank you. So let's take a few deep breaths and connecting with our bodies in this moment, maybe releasing some tension in the neck, in the shoulders, in the abdomen. Land into your body and into your breath in this moment. Give yourselves deeper breaths than usual. And as you feel more and more relaxed, I invite you to connect within to some place deep inside of you, to that spiritual place inside. You can visualize a light within you, growing brighter and brighter, giving you a sense of faith, a sense of trust in life, in yourself, and also bringing you clarity on what truly matters. What are your deepest values, your deepest beliefs? As you connect to this light, you have greater clarity on the deepest guidance in your life. Feel the peace, a profound peace that starts to emanate from this connection with your spiritual source and this sense of alignment with that essence, that deep place that has answers for you, that really nourish you and orient you to live your path of purpose. So, whatever guidance and connection you made, let's accept that unconditionally and let's take 3 deep breaths, receiving whatever benefit you got from this practice, anchoring it in, and slowly returning to the here and now, slowly opening your eyes.
Okay, so thanks a lot. And please feel free, if you're watching us live, to send us your comments, whether you are watching us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, or on Facebook. We will be here receiving your comments, receiving your greetings. And let's just go straight into the topic.
Mm-hmm.
And before we start summarizing each one of the talks, the 5 talks that are part of the Purpose Stages Summit on purpose and spirituality, I would like to feature and to highlight many different words that came up during these talks, such as, connection with self, connection with nature, soul, spirit. There are many occasions during these talks in which the speakers and yourself dive into the difference between the way we comprehend soul and the way we feel and sense the spirit realm, as well as others like tribes and ceremonies and rituals. And perhaps many of these words might seem a little bit distant from certain people's lives and distant from other topics we talked about, like work, like authenticity, like adult development, that, yeah, come more from a cognitive place, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So just to start getting more familiar with all of these concepts, how would you say, or how would you describe this connection between spirituality and purpose that you were starting to talk about before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when we touch upon what purpose really is, it's connected with what gives us meaning in life, what gives us a clear sense of direction, but from a place of this is what is mine to do. This is my place in the world, my place in life, my calling. And
Mm-hmm.
this word calling is very spiritual because it's not just a I have to do something, that comes from another place, but
Mm-hmm.
the calling, it's something that you feel and connect from from your heart, you could say, but the heart, not just your emotions, but the higher heart, which is the soul. um, the spirit is when we differentiate soul and spirit, soul is what makes you unique, your individual calling that uses your gifts and the fullness of who you are and what makes you passionate and fully alive. And I'm already feeling it as I talk about it, like this is what I came to do and be in life. This is me here on this planet, on this human journey. The spirit is something that's more transpersonal, so it's the universal spiritual values of love, compassion, wisdom. And here we talk about unity, and
Mm-hmm.
less emphasis on what makes you unique, more emphasis on what brings us together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the
Mm-hmm.
difference between soul and spirit. And I did cover that with some of the speakers because
Yes.
that distinction is not so well understood in the majority of people.
Yes, yes. And you have mentioned twice the word and the verb and the action of feeling, to feel.
Hmm.
And I think this is quite important because that connection with the spirit and that connection with spirituality and the soul comes a lot from a place of feeling. So what would you say to people who somehow are in that process of learning how to feel. It sounds crazy, right? Because we feel inherently, because we have a body, because we are humans, yet we are very conditioned to using our heads and being very rational. So what would you say to those people who are in the, in the path of connecting with what they feel in a deeper way?
Yeah. Well, I want to reference one of the sages of an earlier theme. I think it was Carol Yi, that speaks about a hunger that gets awakened in a certain moment in life. And it's a hunger that is not for food, but it's a
Mhm.
hunger for meaning, for fulfillment. And you start to recognize it's different because you do the same things you do. You do your task, and you play your roles, etc., and you realize, wait, this is not feeding me in the way I need to be fed.
Mhm.
And so that's when you recognize, oh, there's something that I'm feeling that is asking me to go deeper, and this very often occurs in midlife crisis,
Mhm.
in existential crisis, even in depression, and or in addictions. Because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, addictions, depression, they're signals. There are indicators that there's something missing and that we're not being fed in an existential way, in a spiritual way. But it takes time until we understand that's what we're really looking for. And one more car, or another love affair, or another project, or another like $1 million or whatever it is won't satisfy it. And it takes time until you realize that you come to terms with, oh, I already have everything I need in the material realm. What I'm really yearning for and asking for is to be nourished in a deeper way, in a spiritual way. And
I
whatever
see.
relationship you have with that word spirituality, you can understand that as a hunger for meaning, a hunger for fulfillment, a hunger for depth, a hunger
Mhm.
for
Connection, perhaps.
connection, a connection to something larger than
Mhm.
yourself.
Okay, so let's start to go into the topics, into the talks of each one of the sages that participated in the Purpose Sages Summit on this topic. And we have a very interesting group of people on this. We have people from the US, we have people from Hungary, we have somebody from Colombia with a really nice life experience as well. And the first one on our agenda is Lisa Longworth,
Yeah.
whose session was titled Creative Spiritual Practice. So yeah, Lisa's talk was really nice, and her setup was also very beautiful. She had some paintings that she had made herself, and she talked a lot about art and how painting had connected her to something deeper, what we were just talking about. So what would you say about her talk?
Hmm. Well, what I would say is that she had a big disruption in her life when she was young. And before I name the exact type of disruption, I want to say that anybody who has a big disruption, that is typically when something awakens, something
Mhm.
new awakens, a new search, a new path. And many of the sages talk about this. And so, in the case of Lisa, it was a near death experience.
Mhm.
I think she had a tumor or something along those lines, and the operation was very dangerous. There was a high likelihood of her losing her life, but she didn't. She did survive, and that brought about another relationship with life altogether, completely different. And it took a long time before she could put this in words and find the support and the mentors that helped her express the big shift that she experienced inside. And
I
art,
see.
her artistic journey was super important, and being able to express her journey through her paintings really helped her flourish into the new version of herself that was wanting to be born from that operation and from that big disruption.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lisa mentions something that I would connect to, let's say, the psychic abilities that awaken in humans, those abilities to perhaps foresee or see things very clearly in from their imagination, from their mind's eye, in a very revealing way. And I think many people have that ability to create images in their minds and use their imaginations to see things. And I think she uses this ability she has and channels it through art and through painting to receive all of these beautiful messages that she also put on a book. She talks about her book during her talk, and she uses this metaphor, which is also the title of her book, of going from cocoon to butterfly, and that process of shedding off the conditioning, shedding off the limitations, and flourishing into your authentic self. So, what do you think about this metaphor? Does this metaphor tells you something about this process of connecting with spirits?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It is such an evocative
Mm.
metaphor. I think it's actually the perfect metaphor to understand the blossoming into a new version of ourselves that is guided by something deeper. She calls it starting to live your larger life of purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
as you go from cocoon, or even the caterpillar that is very focused on consumption, and more and more, um, then going into a period of incubating a new version of yourself. And this incubation can come as a crisis, or can come as, when you not knowing what to do, feeling lost. You're actually incubating something new. You're in a period of a liminal moment of transition in this cocoon.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you have the right support, you can then become the butterfly, which is a new and expanded version of yourself that lives this larger life of purpose, and that
Mm-hmm.
you learned to nourish and connect with. She talks about the importance of connecting with your soul every day, because otherwise we can revert back to the old ways and just being automatic, um, going out,
Reactive. Mm-hmm.
reactive,
Mm-hmm.
automatic. And so you need to consistently nourish this part of you that feeds the new you, that the butterfly you. And that's why her topic is creative spiritual practice. And she
Mm-hmm.
gives some examples of how to create such a practice to connect every day with yourself.
Yes, the most wonderful thing about metaphors, and many of our sages use these narratives and poetics to express their vision upon purpose, is that I think we are attempting to do something that is quite ambitious, and it's to put words into something that is really unexplainable, that it's really,
Hmm.
because it doesn't come from the rational mind, and language in a way comes from the rational mind. What we are attempting to do here with the Purpose Ages Summit is to put words, put narratives, put language, and give people language that resonates with what they are feeling. So for me, the fact that Lisa brought up this metaphor along her talk was very valuable and very insightful and giving.
Yeah.
So thanks to Lisa for that,
Hmm.
and for her beautiful story, and for opening up to tell her life story. And second on the agenda, we have Laszlo Karafayev from Hungary, and his session is called Purpose, Ritual, and Altered States. And he is also such an interesting and knowledgeable person.
Hmm.
And his life story as well gives us so much understanding of how the way that we were raised, the culture, and the country that we lived in gives us so many frameworks from which we operate. And then when he goes to the United States and leaves Hungary and he starts his journey of connection with purpose, he realizes how many, or how much baggage, how heavy the baggage was from his own cultural education. So yeah, what would you like to highlight from Laszlo's session, Anna?
Well, what comes up is that there's a lot of people who have a hard time connecting with the spiritual dimension,
Mm-hmm.
and how Laszlo seems to go about this is that he creates um, rituals and experiences for executives, for example, that
Mm-hmm.
might be like super rational, but creates these experiences where like people connect with something that's different from their everyday consciousness. And he also does that with the tool of hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe he also talks about other modalities like plant medicine, etc. And those are all ways to help people who have maybe lost touch with this spiritual
Mm-hmm.
connection to come back and see, wow, there's this like other realm out there that I can access, and that is both inside and outside. It's like this transcendent place. And so he helps people through when they have burnout, and when they feel very disconnected, create these very intense and meaningful rituals to create that connection, even if it's very distant for people.
Yes, and I really enjoy hearing him talk about how he works with leaders and how he works with the corporate environment and with leaders from companies, management, C suites. And he brings this whole experience of connecting with purpose to them individually and also to them as a tribe, as a group that is steering a bigger tribe, because he talks about companies being those tribes of today's society. And I really loved the way he puts it, because he mentions that we have been living in tribes for hundreds of years and we have organized our societies in groups of people, and the equivalent to that today in our social fabrics are companies. And so he's bringing this to the corporate world through the leaders of the corporations.
Hmm.
And then he also talks that about these altered states of mind being one of his favorite topics.
Yeah.
And I think this is super relevant for us to talk about, because a lot of people, when they think about spirituality, they make a direct connection to substances. And many people feel or have heard that perhaps they can awaken something inside of them through the use of substances. And here, whether it's plant medicine or whether it's chemical substances, whichever. And here he talks about how we have the capacity to enter those altered states and reach the same effects of connection through other means, such as meditative or hypnosis, states of
Yeah,
hypnosis.
exactly.
Yes. So again, a shout out to Laszlo, and thanks
Hmm.
for sharing his spirits with us in the Purpose Ages Summit. And then third on the agenda is Rebecca Wildbear,
Hmm.
and very much aligned with her own last name. The title of her session is called Wild Purpose,
Hmm.
and precisely wild. And she talks about this wilderness inside of us and how does that actually tells us something about our connection with spirits.
Yeah. Yeah, she has a beautiful book, Wild Yoga, and
Hmm.
claims that we have a nature deficit disorder, not just a attention deficit disorder, but
Mm.
nature deficit disorder. And that when we go back to nature, both the outer nature and our own nature, there's something instinctual that is awakened, something that's very pure and very real, from our bodies. Like, what does our bodies naturally love to do? How do they naturally love to move? And when we recuperate this, typically in natural environments, there's an aliveness and there's a desire to live that comes back. And we remember what is a source of inspiration, a source of passion for us. And
Hmm.
she also talks about how she's a guide. She's a soul guide in nature, and she's part of a school that is an amazing school, Animas Valley Institute, um, led by Bill Plotkin, the author of many many books about soul and nature. And so she guides people to have soul encounters
Hmm.
when they are out in nature. And so nature is a mirror to our soul. So we can have um, experiences of connecting with that part of us when we are outside and when we start a dialogue. And many of the practices that she
Hmm.
narrates in her book are about how can you start a dialogue with nature and see what comes up for you.
And as you speak, I can hear the wind coming through and responding, participating of this conversation. And yeah, I think that when we start to hear and see nature with those extra senses, there is that wilderness that Rebecca talks about, connecting and making us feel that we are nature as well, that it's not like nature is something and we are something else. Rather, we are nature as well, and we
Yeah.
can communicate with nature the same way that we communicate with other humans in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and she also talks about dreams, and this just makes me think that dreams, visualizations, connecting with altered state of mind are also part of these talks quite a lot. They also come across some of the talks of today. So is there something that you would like to talk about in regards to, for example, dreams or visions when people connect to spirit realm?
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier with Lisa, but I want to bring it
Mm-hmm.
back, which is that our soul speaks in images,
Mm-hmm.
and dreams bring us the images that we need to look at, so that we connect to with our soul and what it's yearning for or what it's stuck in, because sometimes our dreams are also telling us places where we're stuck. But they're full of images, and sometimes we find animals there or find yeah, guides
Mm-hmm.
or symbols. And so she speaks about this dimension of ourselves that is mythopoetic,
Mm.
where it comes from that land, the land of dreams, the land of images, the land of symbols. And you become more and more in touch with that part of us. And that also calls us, that gives us messages. And if we learn to interpret the messages in the dreams or in nature or the synchronicities, there's a lot there for living a life of purpose, because you're guided by something that's deeper, that's soulful, and that speaks in this mysterious language.
Yes, and as a participant of the Purpose Stages Summit and as the audience of the Purpose Stages Summit as well, I want to say hello to Rebecca and also thanks to her for bringing such a calm and enjoyable energy to her speech. That's very very nice to watch and hear. All right. So, fourth and one to last on today's list, we have Brandon Peel, also
Mhm,
from the US, and the title of his session is called The Role of Organizations in Activating Soul Purpose.
mhm,
So, this is also quite interesting because, such as Laszlo and such as other sages from previous days, he's also making a connection between the spirituality of the individual, the spirituality of the collective, and the organizations that we have in society
mhm,
through which we express and create, basically. And he talks about his life story. He talks about how he at some point in his early 20s kind of got out of control because he later in life realized that there was this inner diamond that you talked about in your methodology with the revision academy, this creature within that has needs, that has desires, and how he was not aware of this being a part of himself, and he just went all into distractions and all into activities that would numb him from that connection with himself. And then how through mentors and how through other sages and people he found in his life later, after his early 20s, introduced him to purpose work.
Yeah.
And today he is one of the leaders of
Yeah.
purpose work, one of the biggest leaders of purpose work,
Yeah.
here in the first edition of the Purpose Stages Summit, and committed his entire life to finding out how to nurture that connection with that something that was deep inside of himself. And he talks about how now in his journey nowadays he is very much connected to ceremonies.
Yeah.
He said he had this strong newfound connection to the moon,
Hmm.
and this strong newfound connection to channeling healing from other realms to heal his own nation, when he speaks about what his purpose is. And he says he feels that his purpose is somehow bringing that healing energy from somewhere else
Hmm.
into his nation. Like, I feel like he had a lot of pain for what he experiences in his country
Yeah.
and in the news and in his society, and how he sees this disconnection between his nation and the world as a whole, and his own work and purpose work, and how can his work bring healing into his nation. And something that is really nice about his talk is that he embodies this idea that we have been talking about throughout the whole summit, that purpose is something that is constantly evolving,
Hmm.
right? So at some point in his talks, he tells you, I don't really know where this is going. I don't really know where this is taking me, because it's just information I'm receiving right now, and I'm bringing it into the bigger picture of my life and my purpose.
That's great role modeling, because
Hmm.
when we live a life of sole purpose, and we are opening up to the mystery of being guided, of being, of truly asking ourselves, what's really calling me, what's really alive for me. And so we
Hmm.
see that he's clearly at that stage. And Brandon is the one that formulated those stages, and he documents them in
Hmm.
his book. Of we talk, you, Nia, and I, we
Hmm.
have spoken about this in one of our interviews. If you haven't watched in YouTube, the interviews about what is purpose,
Hmm.
I talk about these stages, and they come from Brandon. The no
Hmm.
purpose is the first stage. The second stage is declared purpose. The third stage is soul purpose, and the fourth stage is unitive purpose. So he's an expert in mapping out um, purpose in general, and he created, um, co-created with others, global purpose leaders,
Hmm.
a association of people who are purpose workers. And I'm so grateful to him and to the whole network, because that's has inspired me to create this Purpose Ages Summit. And many of the members of this group are have been interviewed as sages.
Yes, and he also authors and co-authors three books: Purpose Work Nation, Planet on Purpose, and Purpose Rising. So he definitely has put a lot of his life's work
Yeah.
into exploring the topic of purpose. And one last thing I would like for us to talk about, in regard to his session, is that he talks about this underworld,
Mhm.
um, and how connecting with something inwards, it's actually accessing something that's outwards. And we have also seen it in several of the models that were referenced in our talks and in the sages talks, that there are, um, certain parts of ourselves that are in the shadow, in more of a Carl Jung's framework, and others that are more outwards. So do you recall what aspects of these underworld came up during your talk with Brandon?
Well, from what I remember, this is coming from another Purpose Sage, Justin. Well, I'll think of his name, but he runs a school,
Hmm.
Purpose Guide Institute. And he talks about the lower world, the middle world, and the higher world. And the lower world is the world of soul, and it's very mysterious, and it's exactly, it speaks in language, in symbols, it speaks in metaphors and dreams. Then the middle world is the world where we're adults, conscious, cognitive, being responsible and making things happen and being parents and different roles. That's the middle world, where we're asked to be more mature and more functional. And then the higher world is the world of spirit. So again, it's this is where we elevate our level of consciousness and connect with this unitive level of purpose and this universal peace, universal love,
Hmm.
ideals that most religions talk about. So he,
Yeah.
he maps out these different realms and how humans are invited to work on all three. So
Hmm. Yeah.
we often disregard and neglect the lower realm, the lower worlds, and focus on the middle and the higher, because that's how religions have been structured. Focusing more on that higher spiritual realm, but not in the soul level. And
Yeah.
he writes quite a bit about that in his books.
Yeah, that's great. And final on this list is a woman we hold very dear to our revision academy community. She has been part of it for a decade, I think, right now at this point. And actually, we talked about her life in one of our interviews when we were discussing what purpose is not. And you talked
Yeah,
about her life story. And
right.
this is also from Colombia, Catalina Maecha. And the title of her session is Death as a Catalyst for Purpose.
Yeah.
Very, I think, very on point to be the last one of the whole summit, speaking about end of life and speaking about her experience. And definitely also one of the shortest talks of the summit. She's also taking less than 40 minutes, but is so succulent. And there
Mhm.
is so much to learn about her talk. So I'm so much gonna let you tell us about Catalina, because you were the one who actually witnessed firsthand her whole transition and her whole connection to her life's purpose.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing because I met her in that stage of her being in the disruption that many people have had when you question everything and you think your life is a wreck. And she actually had to take a year off to come to terms with endings of her jobs, of our relationship, and then with in an aunt. She had this experience of being very close to her aunt, who experienced the end of life, as Catalina was going through her existential crisis. And so at that moment, Kata stepped into asking the big questions, because that's what death does. Not
Mm.
only your own death, but also the deaths of your loved ones. They're gonna invite you to ask, what am I doing with my life? How do I want to feel in my last days? Um, and coming to terms with the fact that we have limited time, and that we get to choose. We have the freedom of determining what we want our lives to be. And and so Kata was really awakened and stirred by this experience of seeing her aunt at her end of life, and helped Kata realize that part of her purpose is supporting people at their end of life. So she
Mm.
found a new role, end of life doula, and then also, and eventually that became an end of life consultant.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, but the conversation, from what I recall with Kata, was how every time she supports people at their end of life and their families, the
Mm-hmm.
conversations that come up at that particular time are so relevant. They're the big questions that most people avoid until there's a moment like this, right? When you
Yeah.
have limited time, and when you truly are confronted with these questions, like, what was my life about? What was truly important?
Yeah.
And what was my purpose?
Yeah.
And so that the end of life or death is a catalyst for these kinds of conversations, both internally and with people around you. And the people close to you who are dying, they teach you a lesson of what is my life about. That's what Catalina's aunt did for Kata, which is
Mm-hmm.
helping Kata think what is my life about. And it's at that moment that Kata and I met. And
Mm.
so I was her mentor and supported Kata in the step-by-step process of asking those questions and doing all the self discovery to formulate a purpose, to declare a purpose. So she went through all the stages uh,
Mm-hmm.
with or at least I was close to her as she went through all these stages of declaring her purpose and then connecting with her soul purpose. And she's clearly living that right now.
Yes, and there's something I want to go deeper into that you mentioned related to Kata's life story, and is that she took a year off.
Yeah,
And we see this in many of them, actually. We see this as part of their life experiences when life just reaches a point in which you just have to stop. You
yeah,
just need to stop. And we have discussed this when we talk about doing purpose work, and is that it requires for you to take time for yourself,
yeah.
time away from stressful activities, from a heavy load of responsibilities, and just really let yourself sink in all that information, work on yourself.
Hmm.
And many of them had the same experience, that at some point they had to just quit and
Hmm.
commit to purpose work. Why do you think is so life changing when people take that inspired and committed action to take time off for themselves?
Well, the first thing that happens is that all the stimulus and all the demands of life start to be reduced, and suddenly you have some space to reflect. Something that people don't often do in the very frenetic pace that we're
Mm-hmm.
living in these days, especially now with all our devices and so much information. So taking time off is opening up space to feel. We were talking about this earlier in this conversation, Nia, where when you take time off, you start to feel what's really going on inside, and that brings up questions of how am I doing? What are my needs? What are my true aspirations that will fulfill me? What kind of a person am I? Maybe many people have been um, playing a script of according to expectations of your family or society. In this case, Kata was being a very successful person according to the standards of her family, of her school, of her university, and doing all the things that outwardly on paper were the right things to do. Except she felt tired and unfulfilled and
Mm-hmm.
got into this big crisis. So taking time off helped Kata digest what was that previous life that no longer worked, and what is the new life that was emerging for her. And similar as Brandon, it's very mysterious. You have to listen to the signals. And I remember at that time Kata sharing her dreams with me, and how
Mm-hmm.
the dreams were bringing some messages to her and some new understanding. And then you start to trust in these messages, trust in what comes, and that you don't have to have it all figured out, but life will bring you to where you need to go. But taking time
Yes.
off is essential, especially if you've been a person very focused outwardly and um, with not enough time for listening inward and getting to know yourself truly, what's truly meaningful for you, what nourishes you really, and who are you? What are your talents? What
Mm-hmm.
what do you think you came to do and to be?
Yes. And I want to take this as an opportunity for us to invite people to take time off. They don't have to take a year off. They don't have to quit their jobs and just completely, transform their lives from one day to another. Actually, there are tools provided by the Revision Academy and by yourself that invite people to take some time off their routines
Yeah.
and connect with themselves. And this is what people can do with the Purpose Stages Summit as well. I want to tell whomever is watching us right now that I watched all the talks. I, you know, consumed all this information, and it's really transforming just listening to them, just really connecting with the life stories of each one of them. And I'm entirely sure that it will be even more nourishing for people to take those few hours per week to watch the talks one by one with the communications journey that you have designed, that people
Mhm.
can access and that people can get, in which they will also receive journaling prompts and purpose tea time exercises with music playlists, and they can really take some time off to
Mhm.
digest all of this content with more ease and with more peace in their hearts as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's very well said. It's even if you can't take, as you said, time completely off, and take a sabbatical, but just taking 30 minutes per week, to connect within, or a little bit every day, to start to ask yourself some questions. And we've crafted, as you said, a communications journey to go along with watching these sessions, these beautiful conversations. And each one of these sages have a unique perspective on purpose. I don't provide any definition on purpose, but everyone, I ask every one of them, how did you find your purpose? So we go into their stories, to their vulnerabilities, and you see how these breakthroughs allowed for them to find their truth, their path.
Yeah,
And from there, there's some tool that each person will find, or some understanding that they'll get from watching this. And then if you take some time to reflect what's in that for you, and journaling about, um, where are you at in terms of your authenticity, in terms of your work, in terms of your leadership, your trauma also, and your adult development, and your spirituality. All of this is going to be guidance for where are you at in your path of purpose.
great, wonderful invitation. And Anna, there was something about these talks on spirituality that was so nice to watch, and is that all of these five sages laugh so much. They laugh, they use humor, they bring so much joy to live into their talks. I felt it with many of them, but I really particularly felt it with these five guys, these five men and women who were even speaking about a lot of their vulnerabilities and a lot of their difficulties through their life stories, and yet they were so lively and they were bringing in so much joy into the conversation. That was wonderful. It's
Hmm.
really wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's an indicator of being in touch with your aliveness, to your authentic self, and to your source,
Yes,
and your
and
soul.
also how grounded they are, because they
Mm.
speak so
Yeah.
clearly. Their speech is so clear. You would imagine that because they will be speaking about spirituality, their speech would be more abstract, let's say. But on
Mhm.
the contrary, all of them were so grounded and so clear in their speech that there was actually so much evidence of them living in connection, spiritual connection. And I really want to thank you, Anna, for putting together all of these people in one place for us to learn about purpose. I personally didn't know that this was such a big territory, and there was so much studies, there was so much research in the field of purpose, and this is just a great place to start to learn about purpose.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
It's my huge pleasure, and whoever's viewing or listening, thank you for engaging with us, in with this material. Trust me, all the investment you do with your purpose is something you're doing not just for yourself, but for everybody around you. Because
Mhm.
people who live a life of purpose, they emanate light and emanate passion, and that's absolutely
Yes.
contagious.
Yes. And to finish with the logistical announcements and invitations, we have put out lots of content on our social media if people are wondering and considering whether to go into our platform and buy the full access and the premium experience of the Purpose Stages Summit. So if you are in that consideration stage, go ahead and check out the social media of Revision Academy. You will find 3 interviews made by myself and Anamaria about what is purpose, what purpose is not, and the path of purpose. And you will also find all the 6 live sessions that we had available there on YouTube so that you can really go and immerse yourself or have a first immersion on the topic. And you can also search on our LinkedIn, on the Revision Academy LinkedIn, in the field or in the category of documents, the biographies of
Yeah.
every single one of the 30 sages that participated of this first edition of the Purpose Sages Summit. Each one of them contains the name of their books that they have written. So you also have an absolutely great human library at the Purpose Sages Summit, and you can actually hear them talk. And you also can start building your own book library on books on about purpose,
Hmm.
just going there and looking at the bios and biographies of all of these Purpose Stages Summit. So, Anna, this is the last of our session. So, is there something else you would like to say before we let go of this activity of today?
Yeah, well, I would add that the importance of being in conversation about these topics, and just like you and I have been in conversation about purpose, and it's been so enjoyable. I encourage everyone viewing and listening to be in conversation about purpose. Interrupt that
Mhm.
weather talk. Bring
Yeah.
in the substance, the succulence. What is it that you truly want to talk about, right? And we've given you all these material, and you can, if you hear one of our sessions with the sages or one of these interviews among Stefania and I, you can name it to people. I heard this. What do you think? What do you think about purpose? What do you think
Mhm.
about spirituality? And bring a new conversation to the table. That starts to shift the culture and the relationships and elevate what it is that we are paying attention to. So I encourage you to be bold and really nourish yourself with the conversations you're truly wanting to have.
Great. And when we started working together and on this Purpose Ages Summit a few months ago, we set the intention of making something pure from our hearts that
Mm.
would really ignite and awaken that connection to purpose on anybody who would come across our content, whether it was just 2-minute clip on Instagram or 1 hour live session here on our broadcasting channels. So I am confident that we have brought that intention to life and that people have really connected with that sense of awakening, that connection with purpose
Yeah.
in their lives, in their families, in their communities, and hopefully in the entirety of humanity. So, again, thanks a lot. Have such a great rest of the week, Anna, and let's continue to work towards this purpose for the entirety of our fellow humans on this earth today.
That's right. We invite everybody to come along on this wave of purpose
Mhm.
awakening and join us in this conversation so more and more people are putting purpose at the center of our lives for more fulfillment, for more joy, more connection, and a sense of direction to create the world we really want.
Great. So great to finish on a high note. And thanks a lot, everyone, for watching us either live or as a replay. And see you on another occasion. Hopefully, another Purpose Ages Summit.
Thank you.
Bye,
Wonderful.
Anna. Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.
Yeah.
Gracias.